Hello everyone, welcome to my Dead Space remake, hard difficulty, no damage walkthrough. This is chapter 11, alternate solutions, and this is a chapter that makes you expect more than what actually happens. So, this chapter for the most part is just walking moments and cutscene moments. There's not a lot of gameplay to chapter 11, but this room that I'm in represents the biggest gameplay component to chapter 11. And you'll remember this room if you played the original Dead Space, because this was the room where you had to escort the marker while you were dealing with those tentacles and the other enemies. It was definitely one of the worst rooms ever in Dead Space 1, because Dead Space 1 isn't really intelligent with the way it uses its enemies and with the way they design the environments and the like. And this room in the original Dead Space had so many enemies, so many different enemy types just converging on you that the gameplay could easily fall apart. And then you have the tentacles, and the tentacles could be very, very annoying to deal with. And the way they just track you down is pretty absurd. So you had to pick your shots correctly and try to take out the tentacles when they gave you an opening. And it was a pretty messy sequence. But on the remake, I would say this sequence is a definite improvement over the original Dead Space, because you don't have massive onslaughts of enemies. I mean, if you want to call the spawns that occur in this sequence an onslaught, you probably can, but compared to Chapter 10, the enemy diversity isn't so extreme, and I feel like it's complementary to the game's designs. And there's also a lot of prep work that you'll probably want to do for chapter 11 when you're in this room right here, and you're gonna see it when I'm just speeding up the video in certain parts. So what I'm doing right now is I'm going to each side of the room and I'm prepping for the upcoming spawns. And on three corners of this room, there are tables that you can destroy, and you can use the table legs as impalement devices. So what I'm doing here is I'm basically preparing all of my kinesis objects to deal with the enemies, and I'm going to place them in the center of each corner. And I'm also going to remove any potential object that might screw with the detection on Kinesis, because as you've seen throughout this entire walkthrough, Kinesis is very sensitive on its detection, and Isaac will grab everything, and most of the time he will just not grab the thing you want. So getting rid of that random variable is very important when doing the prep work for the sequence. And I do like how you can go all the way back to the manual save point before you start the marker escort step, and the game will log where these items were at the time you saved. So if I do ever decide to reload my manual save that I created after I did this prep work, the objects will be where they were, which is really good design. And it just saves so much time, because there's nothing more annoying than doing all of this prep work, taking damage, and then having to do all of that prep work again when I restart the checkpoint. So that's one less hassle that I have to deal with, and that switch on the left is what activates the marker to start moving. So I'm going to not activate it yet because I haven't finished my prep work, and I'm also taking the fans as well. You'll want to take some of the fans from the vents and place them in the center of each corner, because there are armored necromorphs that will spawn during the sequence, and the only way you are going to deal with the armored necromorphs with an impalement device is by using the fans or the necromorph blades, which makes absolutely no sense. And I just don't understand how pipes and table legs aren't capable of stunning or impaling armored necromorphs when they're equally as sharp as the necromorph blades or the fans. I mean, just the game has no logic with how the armored necromorphs respond to each of the impalement devices. It's really pathetic, and it just leads to a lot of frustration when you're trying to grab a necromorph blade and Isaac grabs the wrong impalement device, and you try to use that against the armored necromorph and he doesn't flinch, because it's almost like Isaac never even threw the impalement device at the armored necromorph. It just bounces off of the armored necromorph, and it's so stupid. But I've started the sequence, and so I go to this corner right over here, and I just deal with the enemies normally. I'm not going to use any of the impalement devices. So there's one enhanced necromorph that I just kill normally, and then these enemies I use the pulse rifle mines, and I aim directly for the chest to instantly kill them with the mines. So now the rest of the enemies are going to spawn, and this is where I need to rely upon the impalement devices. So there's going to be an enhanced necromorph right now, and I believe a bunch of normal necromorphs. I don't think any armored necromorphs spawn during the sequence, which really helps. So there's a necromorph, and then there should be an enhanced necromorph right there. It's so hard to see. They've made the sequence a lot darker compared to the original Dead Space. And that's just something you're going to notice about this game compared to the original Dead Space. Everything is just so dark. It's very hard to see. Like, they've tried to emphasize on the shadows a lot more in this remake. And I understand what they were going for, but when you couple the shadow effect with the dishonest audio and the times when the impalement devices don't work correctly on the necromorphs and the other poor designs present with the necromorphs, I just don't feel like it achieves the results the developers were going for, and I just feel like it leads to a lot more frustration. But there is a tentacle, so as you see right there, I used the firewall effect on that tentacle and it instantly died, which is really good design. The tentacles on this remake are nowhere near as annoying as they are in the original Dead Space. In fact, I believe in the original Dead Space, even when you destroyed these tentacles, they could just come back during this marker escort step. So the incentive to deal with the tentacles was very little in the original Dead Space. Oh, and also, this is very annoying. This tentacle is the most annoying one. The marker is getting in the way, and also, I have to put myself in range for that tentacle to attack so that I can actually hit its weak spot. And the problem is, the tentacles attack you so fast, and the tracking on their attacks is god tier, that it is so easy for them to hit you if you just expose yourself ever so slightly. And I have a blooper of this saved. And I also hate how in my blind playthrough, I stood in the center of the platform where you have the two bridge control mechanisms, and the tentacles easily hit me even when I was moving. And I just don't understand how in the first playthrough you can possibly anticipate when those tentacles will attack. It's so retarded. I don't like that. So again, you have to have premature knowledge of the enemy spawns and also with the way the tentacles spawn in if you want to have any success with this sequence. And it happens far too frequently with this game and also with the Dead Space games of old, where you have to have like forward knowledge of the sections if you want to achieve success, and they put too much of an emphasis on forward knowledge, and because of that, it really highlights how badly designed the Dead Space games can be a lot of the times. But this is the final spawn right here, so this is where you're going to get 2 enhanced necromorphs, 2 armored necromorphs, 2 normal necromorphs, and 1 exploder. The flamethrower is needed for a lot of the other necromorph types, but it will not work against the armored necromorphs. So I need to stand my ground with the plasma cutter whenever those armored necromorphs show up. And again, I need to use the fans to my advantage when dealing with the armored necromorphs. The table legs will not work, and I will need to use the necromorph blades as well when dealing with the armored necromorphs. All of this tedious nonsense just because they couldn't design the armored necromorphs better. It's really stupid. But now that that encounter's done, take the time to grab this Peng statue. This statue is worth 30,000 credits, and it's definitely needed for the end of the game. And I go up here, and then I think, oh, I will definitely take an impalement device with me, because there could be enemies that will spawn. And I was right. I didn't even know there was an enemy that could spawn right here, and I don't even know if this is a random spawn, or if that's a spawn that occurs every single time, but I believe this one's a random spawn, because it just feels like a random spawn if he's going to spawn right on top of me. This right here, why would the game spawn the Leaper on the other side of this door? And again, I got very confused by the dishonest audio, so he nearly hit me, but he's dead. And with all that done, I'm going to replenish my stasis, and I'm going to create a save, because I don't want to do all of that again. And all we have to do now is get to the hangar bay to meet up with Dr. Kine and Daniels. Before we can do that, though, there is going to be a mandatory combat encounter with a bunch of Twitchers and female necromorphs. And there's also one enhanced necromorph, but the flamethrower is necessary for the sequence, because you've already seen how bullshit Twitchers are. But the spawns here are completely random. There's no telling which ceiling vent they choose to come out of. But this guy chooses to come out of the left vent right over there, and because I can't track him down, I'm going to plant a firewall right there, and I'm going to try to dismember his limbs. I should be aiming for the stasis field and then shooting his arms, but I'm trying to get rid of his legs first, but I don't think it's that useful to really do that. But there's going to be more enemies spawning, so this time it's going to be a female necromorph, but I'm going to use the fan to my advantage to dismember her limb and then try to avoid the projectile, and that projectile is so fast. It does a massive amount of damage to you as well. I don't really understand why you can't grab that. If you can grab the Puker's projectiles in Dead Space 2, why can't you grab the female Necromorph projectiles or the Lurker's projectiles? That doesn't make any sense. And if Isaac is able to grab something as small as a cup, he should be able to catch something as small as a projectile fired from the female Necromorphs or the Lurkers. Yeah, good old Dead Space logic, just to artificially inflate the game's difficulty in the wrong sort of way. But right now, I'm just using up a lot of flamethrower field just so I can keep these enemies away from me. And I'm also having to move from side to side to avoid the female Necromorph's acid attack. And that sequence is done. And skipping on ahead, we'll be doing the 0G moment where we have to deal with a bunch of black lurkers and black leapers while we're busy trying to get the marker onto the shuttle. And you can actually activate the circuit for this back in Chapter 3. I didn't choose to do so because I didn't want to deal with the enemies that were following me. But it's cool that the game allows you to interact with these objects back in Chapter 3, and you're just wondering, what is the whole point of this? And then you get to this chapter, and you're like, oh yeah, that's the point. And you actually did something similar in the original Dead Space. I questioned if Chapter 3 had the exact same kind of setup where you're interacting with circuits and you're wondering, what's the whole point of this? And then you come to this chapter and it's the same thing, because you do the same thing where you have to turn these platforms so that the marker can actually move along the platform in order to get it onto the shuttle. So yeah, I definitely like the choice of reimagining here, although dealing with these enemies can be a bit of a pain. And right now we're dealing with a bunch of normal lurkers and normal leapers, so these enemies will die very fast. But we will be dealing with the black lurkers and the black leapers when we move the marker again. And also make sure you turn on that circuit, that way the platforms will actually work. They're gonna spawn from the hatches on the ground. And also watch this. I was surprised to see that this wasn't classed as an attack animation, but when he jumps from the ground level up to this platform, he doesn't damage you. And I confirmed this because I tried to heal myself, but he will not use the med kit, so that was pretty surprising. But there are still like 2 black lurkers and 1 black leaper left in this sequence. So I'm just going to wait up here, but not too close to the edge, because the black lurkers can actually fire from below. But there is the next black lurker, so I'm just going to take care of him. And then there's the next black leaper. So all pretty simple stuff, and my plasma cutter is decimating these enemies. And luckily for me, I get a stasis pack, which is exactly what I needed, because there is a sequence later on where you have to use stasis to get past 2 black leapers in order to get onto the shuttle. And having the game drop that stasis pack was very helpful. Although I could have just gone back and purchased a stasis pack, or just gone back to the stasis recharge station, but I didn't want to put up with that. But here we go, and now the rest of this is just cutscenes, so there's going to be a lot of editing. However, we can take the time to pick up some explosive canisters and take them with us to the flight control area where that hallucination of Nicole is. And the reason why I do this is because of the Twitcher that spawns. I'm sure I could have used the flamethrower on that Twitcher, but I just wanted to play it safe, and I'm positive that Twitchers can survive 1 explosive canister, which is why I take 2 with me. I'm taking 3, but it's not necessary. I don't do anything with the 3rd explosive canister. But I'm just going to roll them along and then bring 2 of the canisters with me and then place them in strategic position so that the combined explosion will be able to kill the Twitcher that spawns from the ceiling after using the remote pilot function to bring back the shuttle that Kendra stole. But here comes the Twitcher, so there he is. I'm going to wait until he gets out of the animation and dropping down, and then finish him off, just like that. And now that I have the stasis, I'm going to be able to stun these 2 leapers and make my way to the shuttle. And I'm going to make a save after doing some menial tasks at the start of Chapter 12. And I will also take the time to upgrade as well. I'm going to upgrade my pulse rifle, and I will also be selling a couple of things. And that will conclude Chapter 11. But I'm just very curious to see what Chapter 12 will be like, because Chapter 12 is just filled with a lot of enemies at the start, and I don't feel like the enemy placements are that intelligent for Chapter 12. But hopefully they won't feel as unintelligent as a lot of the enemy placements in Chapter 10, and also with that shitty boss fight against the Hunter. But I've sold my stuff. I'm also going to sell that flamethrower fuel. That's completely unnecessary. And I'm going to upgrade my pulse rifle, make a save, and that's that. But here is one blooper involving the tentacles. Look how efficiently they tracked me down. And did I even touch me? It didn't even look like it. And then this right here, my firewall ended up clipping on the marker, and I somehow took damage from invisible fire. Look at this. Look at that fucking bullshit. But at least those were the only two bloopers I had compared to the shit I went through with Chapter 10. But that is the end of this chapter. Stay tuned for Chapter 12, the final chapter of this game. Thank you all for watching, and you take care now.